Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. My name is Reg Smith and I'm your MC for today's meeting of Rotary Melbourne. Once again, we're broadcasting from various locations, and if you do have difficulty during today's meeting, we will be loading the video and a podcast of today's meeting on the Rotary Melbourne website in a day or so. Please note that microphones have been muted for the duration of the presentation. Questions and comments can be posed via the chat function throughout the presentation. Thanks today will be given by Ross Scholes-Robinson, followed by the Loyal Toast presented by Kevin Sheehan. Please ensure your glass or some other appropriate vessel is charged. Ross, over to you. I'm just sorry everybody. This is an operator error. Just unmuting Ross. Thank you, Ross.
I learned recently that Amish people have an old proverb saying, kind words and deeds keep our gardens free of weeds. Now the virus is upon us, and in our retirement village in Croydon, we're in lockdown. And visitors' names are taken along with their temperature when they want to come in. Even us residents, when we return from outings for shopping and other visitations, go through the same rigmarole. For me, in recovery mode after back operations, good wishes received from President Kevin and past President Robert have been inspiring, and a lovely letter from one of our lady members received 2 weeks or so ago is one that I will always treasure. Contact with others through Zoom is something I now look forward to for church and Rotary. And also we have friends from our church and within our village who send us interesting snippets, pretty frequently too. Whilst giving lots or thanks that our own lot in life is okay because of the kind words we receive, we do need to be supportive of those who are doing it tough. And there's a lot that are. And that's what Rotary is all about, inspiring us members to contribute in every way so that we can support Rotary's drive to make our world a better place for everyone. Amen.
President Kevin.
Thank you, Ross, for inspirational words, and it's good to see you, and I trust Judy fit and well. You're a real stalwart of our club, and we really appreciate your connection with us today. It's my pleasure to propose a toast to Australia and Rotary International. Australia and Rotary International.
Australia and Rotary International.
It's also my pleasure to welcome you to the 42nd meeting of our Rotary year. In fact, the 4,842nd meeting of our club and our 10th online meeting in our 99-year history. Our guest speaker online today is Neville Power, Chair, the National COVID-19 Coordination Commission, and a past member of our club. Nev was recently tapped on the shoulder by the Prime Minister, and true Rotary fashion, he said yes to the appointment. And he'll be speaking on damage control and economy reboot. He'll be more formally introduced later in the program when he is able to join us online, and he'll be introduced by past President Peter Dakin. But in the meantime, I certainly, in spirit, welcome Nev to the meeting and thank Peter for his involvement. Online today for special presentation and recognition, naming as a Paul Harris Fellow by our club is another stalwart member, Bernie McIntosh. Welcome, Bernie, and your family, anyone who is connected with you online today to our meeting, and also welcome to the many visitors and guests. I see we have John Bertram on board today. He was our speaker a few weeks ago and inspired us, a bit like Ross Scholes-Robinson has done today in terms of how we are dealing with the current change of lifestyle. It is now my pleasure to call on Jim Orchard for a report on the activities of the District Bushfire Committee and Rotary Melbourne's contribution. Jim, needs to be unmuted, Reg, and we're ready to go when you are ready, Jim.
Okay. Hopefully you can hear me. Reg, could you pop up that little presentation?
Shall. Just coming up now.
Okay, so I guess our most of the work that I've been focused on has been the Caravan project, which, if you go to the next slide, Reg, has some of the factors here. So you can read through those things yourself if you're quick enough. A couple of key points: Caravans donated by Ken Davis, so no project without Ken. The other key person is Pearl Finlay James, who's the president of Bairnsdale Sunrise Club, who's the key contact in the bushfire area and is working with case workers to identify the most needy recipients of accommodation. And also we've had a great input from other clubs around Melbourne. There's a list of them there that are interested in the project and in a number of cases putting in money to help refurbish the caravans. So going to the next slide, Reg, shows the handover of the first caravan. So the work has moved from the conceptual to the actual. So that's the caravan, all fixed up and ready to go, fully registered. The chap in the red shirt is the recipient, and the other folks there are the Bairnsdale Rotary people organising the handover. It was fitted out with linen and cutlery and stuff like that in Bairnsdale, so it's all ready to go. The next slide shows where the first two caravans went to. So this one here went to Goongerah, and the next one went to Genoa. So you can see where they are on the map. This shows obviously East Gippsland and superimposed the bushfire areas. So they're clearly in the areas of the bushfires. And the next slide just quickly highlights some sort of next steps. So we have 7 caravans sort of allocated to individual people, including the 2 that have already gone. And we'll be moving them out over the next month, hopefully the next 2 on next weekend. We'll be looking to continue to be in East Gippsland, but also in the area around Corryong and potentially into southern New South Wales, depending where the sort of need is greatest. There are a few volunteer opportunities, perhaps in terms of transport, so we can circle around with that. And in terms of other bushfire projects, as we sort of get through the Caravan project, mental health and trauma treatment project that's being headed up by Norman and Pam. And there's also an opportunity for the club to be involved in perhaps setting up a bushland sanctuary around the Malakuta area. So that's under sort of the broad auspices of the district bushfire relief. And that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Jim, and we greatly appreciate your work and the work the committee are doing in this area. That other tragedy of 2020, the bushfire tragedy. It's now my pleasure to call upon Barbara Urondis, who is going to tell us about the planning of the upcoming Arts Committee Architectural Walk. Over to you, Barbara.
Thank you, Kevin. Those of you who have participated in a walk previously will know this is our 7th annual architecture walk. And being Rotarians, we're not going to let a good virus step in our way, but it is going to be a little bit different. A couple of consistent things that usually happen on the architecture walk is we visit a neighbourhood of buildings and we have a chat about them and then share a meal. So what we're going to do this year is a little bit different. First of all, we're going to be online. The other thing is that I'm pleased to say normally I have to limit numbers to about 30 people, but there is no limit this year, which is going to be terrific. And I'm hoping that everyone can participate because it's a whole of club event. And those of you who are not members of the club are also welcome. So that would be lovely to have you join us. The thing that we're doing a little bit different, of course, is because we're doing it online, we'll also be fundraising for Feeding Young Minds, which is a not-for-profit organisation based in St Kilda that deals with children with disabilities and art. So they're looking in the arts and working with children with disabilities. And our dinner will be provided by Street, which is a social enterprise based in Collingwood. And they work on the basis of training unemployed youth in hospitality, specifically in baking and cooking is their main area. So we're still going to go for a walk, we're still going to have dinner, and we're going to do some fundraising for a couple of really good organisations. So if you could have a look behind me here, I've sat in this spot in the office today, and I know I'm a bit in shadow, but my office looks out onto the Yorkshire Brewery Tower. And this is where we're going to start our walk. And so the theme of this year's walk is going to be a pub crawl of Collingwood. The difference is that I will be doing the walking and you will be doing the eating because we have got dinner. And you will be responsible for your own drinks. So please bring your own on the couch, wherever you are. And with our restrictions lifting, you might organise a group of a few of you to sit together and do it, because after the walk, we're going to have a pub quiz. And with some pub style prizes. So it's going to be lots of fun. And you'll receive an email this afternoon from Joe with all the details. Now the date is for next Friday, the 29th of May. We'll be starting off at 7:30. Key in a couple of minutes earlier like we do here so we can get organised. And if you're not a Rotarian, please let Jo know and she will send you through all the details. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Barbara. And you'll be pleased to know that I have elevated this to an all-of-club event, given that there is no other way of gathering together as we have done in the past towards the end of the Rotary year. So a pub crawl through Collingwood sounds terrific. I do note in my earlier discussions with Barbara that the most famous of all pubs, the Grace Darling, the official home of the creation of the Collingwood Football Club, is currently closed. So Barbara might have difficulty in getting some footage of the famous room in the basement where that occurred and where the Go Pies celebrated the last grand final.
I've got a photo.
You've got a photo. That is terrific. Well, yep. Chris Wong will be delighted to know that. I'm waiting on a cue from Reg, our hostmaster. As soon as he has got Nev Power online. Otherwise, it's called a song and dance act, and I'm delighted to fill in a little bit.
Neville, I think Neville will be here with us in a minute by the look of it, Kevin.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you, Reg. I'm still waiting for that cue. Yes. We've got Peter Dakin ready to go into action. And certainly the experience of the last 10 Zoom meetings, we've kept up our tradition of having a meeting each week. Couldn't have been done without the assistance and the technical expertise of Reg Smith. Mark Pinoli kicked us off with the first live broadcast, which was from the Rotary office, when we had Professor Peter Doherty speak to us. And haven't we learnt a lot more about COVID-19 since his address? In fact, he was featured on the TV again on Monday night, and on the 30th of April had a major contribution to the Age newspaper spread. So the Doherty Institute is part of the team that's racing throughout the world to look at how a vaccine can be developed. It's terrific also to have Joe Mavris hosting our coffee clubs, and we'll talk about that briefly as an infill. We're going to have our coffee club again this Friday at 10:30. So jump online and let us know what's happening in your world. It's been a lot of fun. We've had about 20 online each week, and we are continuing, of course, to try and keep connected with our members, and in fact are connecting in a bigger way than we were ever able to do from the 35th floor. At the same time, our committees are meeting by Zoom, and tonight we'll have our board meeting by Zoom. So we're still in the technological world today. We have a fairly full agenda, and there's been a terrific effort made by the Finance Working Group, headed up by past President Robert Fisher. And we'll be considering that report amongst other matters tonight, including club awards going forward. So that is a little bit of an update as we move to have Nev Power join us.
Kevin Neville's just arrived.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, it's my great pleasure to welcome Nev and ask Peter Dakin, our past president, who knows Nev well, to do the official introduction of our guest speaker today. I'm thrilled that Nev has made himself available. I guess I tapped him on the shoulder when I rang him many weeks ago and congratulated him on his appointment. Over to you, Peter Dakin. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. First of all, I would like just to apologise for my black eye, which I've got today, which was not inflicted by a Collingwood supporter, but in fact my eye surgeon on Monday. So I'll put the glasses up to try and cover it up a little bit. Look, it's my great pleasure to introduce our past member Nev Power as guest speaker today. I've known Nev for over 20 years when he was CEO with Morgan Steel Group. He subsequently held similar roles with Thiess and then Fortescue Metals Group from 2011 to 2018. As an extraordinarily successful and busy executive, Nev found it difficult to attend our weekly Rotary lunches, but was a wonderful contributor to the club. Nev and his wife Irma hosted Hawthorn Camberwell group meetings at their home in Hawthorn East, and he made every effort to support Second Bite, which of course is still a wonderful project supported by our club. Nev would often return from interstate to pick up goods at the market on a Saturday morning. I think it might have been the Brand Market, if I recall, back in the early 2000s. Nev and Irma also supported our student exchange program, hosting a Brazilian boy, Paulo Sunarai, who had the great thrill of being flown by Nev in his helicopter on their Queensland cattle station. Interesting to note that I think that Nev holds both fixed wing and a rotary pilot licence. Nev was appointed by the Prime Minister in March 2020 as chairman of the COVID-19 Coordination Commission, advising the government on all non-health related issues, including transport, supplies, manufacturing and infrastructure. Acknowledging the continued deterioration in our economy and rapidly growing unemployment, would you please join me in welcoming Nev to address us on the critical topic of damage control and economic reboot to keep Australians in jobs. Welcome, Nev. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you, Kevin, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to talk to you today. That was quite a bit of reminiscing, Peter, and it brought back some very fond memories. And I was a very proud member of Melbourne Rotary and despaired at my inability to get to meetings, but really enjoyed the on-the-ground activities, and Second Bite became a core part of our family activities on the weekend, and I think was wonderful for teaching my boys humility and all about service and what Rotary and what about giving back is all about. So that was a very key part of our life there, and I'm very proud that my boys were part of it with me. Thanks for the opportunity to talk today, and of course this is very, very unusual times for all of us, and it is very challenging for us as a society and as a community to be able to deal with the coronavirus. The Commission's been appointed, as Peter said, to really do two key areas, and that is to minimise and mitigate the impact of the virus on people's lives and livelihoods as we increase the restrictions to contain it and control the epidemiology. And then secondly, to accelerate and help the recovery process to make that as fast as possible. And to a very large extent, our focus has been on preserving and creating jobs and trying to get people back into work, because we all know that being in work and being gainfully employed, being a breadwinner, is all about your state of mind and mental health as much as it is about financial health sometimes. And we are, as human beings, are not designed to be locked up in houses and away from social interaction. And of course, the isolation brings with it a lot of other knock-on effects and some very disappointing aspects of human behaviour around domestic violence and treatment of children. So we are very conscious of trying to get people out of their homes and back to work as soon as we can, to restore the economy, but also the fabric of our society and community. In the early days of the Commission, and I say that knowing that we are full 7 weeks old at this stage, we were very much focused on fixing problems in the supply chain and trying to mitigate the impacts of restrictions as it came on in state borders and in the gatherings of groups and so on. And those were particularly around areas like medical PPE, the procurement and manufacture of that, getting foodstuffs out to our remote and regional communities through the supermarket supply chains, which had been seriously disrupted. We established an IR task force with Greg Combay, one of our commissioners, to help with industrial relations issues on the ports to keep critical imports coming through our ports, as well as people like marine pilots and establishing them in safe workplaces. As we've gone on to the sort of next phase of the virus, where we've gone into a process of having to live with the virus, our core focus has been helping businesses establish processes and protocols that keep their customers and their workers safe as we go into this period now of starting to reopen and allow people back into restaurants and cafes and hotels and venues. And this is a critical part of the recovery, because some 60% of Australian workers are employed in our hospitality and food service and our arts and creative industries. So while it may not have the greatest economic impact as manufacturing, construction, mining and agriculture, getting those industries back up and going safely and securely is critically important to re-establishing employment. That has some specific challenges with it, and what we've been doing is working with industry bodies and industries, state governments and employee associations to try and help them establish COVID-safe work practices in the introduction of social distancing and personal hygiene and reporting regimes in workplaces and in public outlets, to have a process that allows a quick response to any COVID virus outbreaks in those workplaces, and protocols to clean up and re-establish public areas and work areas to meet the standards to make sure no one else gets infected. And we've seen a number of these issues in Victoria with Cedar Meats, and we've seen them in Tasmania with the healthcare workers. We've seen them in New South Wales with nursing homes and backpackers. And I guess the most devastating of all has been the cruise ships, where we've seen outbreaks on the Ruby Princess, which has attributed to over half of Australia's cases of COVID-19 came off that one single cruise ship. Today, I think all of us as Australians can be very proud of what each of us individually has been able to achieve, and our state and federal government has been able to achieve. And that is that the virus is well and truly under control, with active cases now down to around 540 something cases, and very few hospitalisations and even fewer ICU and ventilator cases. So it's been tremendously successful in the suppression phase of the virus. And now this next stage is about progressively releasing the restrictions, allowing people to get back to more normal activities, however, reducing the risk of a second wave or a spread of the virus, which could come if we don't follow those same behaviours that we talked about before: social distancing, personal hygiene, etc., and the ability to respond very quickly to trace people that may have been infected and to respond by providing testing and healthcare for anybody that does get infected. The next stage for us as we go through this process will be looking at the recovery. And there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of engagement around this. We've consulted very, very widely with businesses, state governments, industry groups, and we've commissioned a couple of special task forces around this. The first was the Andrew Liveris Manufacturing Task Force that looked at the supply of low-cost energy into the east coast of Australia to support manufacturing. And the second was advanced manufacturing across a number of areas, high-tech niche, computerized, automated manufacture, energy intensive such as fertilizers and agrochemicals, foodstuffs and downstream processing of our agricultural products, and finally our defence industries and what we needed to do around sovereign capability. That work's gone really well, and I think it points to a number of areas, and our objective here is to come through this with strong businesses that can survive and compete globally, that don't need to be government subsidised, and because we don't want to just create a welfare state for businesses coming through. So how we actually implement that is the debate and the discussion that's going on at the moment. And we're working very closely with government ministries and reporting back into the Prime Minister's office regularly to continue that update and help, together with the Health Committee and Treasury, to develop the recovery plan and a comprehensive recovery plan for how we can accelerate out of the impacts of the virus. Currently, as you would have heard the Treasurer say, it's costing Australia $4 billion a week to support the JobKeeper and JobSeeker programs, as well as the small business liquidity loans. And the objective is to try and get as much normal business activity and as many jobs back as we can to reduce that support, because we all know that the debt we'll have at the end of this will represent a very significant hangover from the virus. And we need to stimulate economic activity and growth in our business sector to create the jobs and the strong communities that we need to repay that debt and recover the economy. We know there are some sectors that are going to be impacted much more significantly and for longer than others. I think anything to do with international travel, we can say will take quite some considerable time. So this is international tourism, international students and international services work is going to be impacted. So we need to identify those areas of the economy, like manufacturing and like our energy intensive areas, like agriculture, that we can accelerate and compensate for those areas of the economy that will be impacted longer. The phase that we're in at the moment is really about talking to businesses and engaging with them about developing business models that operate in the new world that we find ourselves in. For example, I talked about international tourism being impacted, but in fact, Australians spend around $20 billion a year more travelling overseas and holidaying overseas than international visitors spend here in Australia. So there is an opportunity for us to repackage our tourism products and make them more attractive and more appropriate for domestic tourism and regional tourism so that we can promote that through. So that hopefully has given a bit of an insight. Our second committee is the not-for-profits, and that is very much about looking right across the charities and non-charity sectors in not-for-profits and helping them restructure and reconfigure around a reduced level of donations and volunteers, but also equipping them to take care of vulnerable Australians as we come through this, because those are most at risk from the virus and most at risk from the economic fallout. So, Kevin and Peter, I'll leave it at that, but that in a nutshell gives us an overview of what we're doing on the Commission. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity of addressing you today.
Thank you, Nev, very much. Nev, have you got time for a couple of questions from Reg?
I do. I've got about 5 minutes or so, so please go ahead.
Over to you, Reg.
Thanks very much, Peter. Nev, we've had several questions. The first of those goes to the point about international travel. It's about the conference industry, and Sue Davis, who is a medical professional and a member of our club, has asked whether there's any alternative strategies likely to be developed to quick test people on arrival and pre-departure to enable them to avoid the 14-day quarantine.
Yeah, thanks, Reg. Look, it is a very good question, and one that we posed in the context of a number of different industries. The answer to date has been a resounding no. The medical people are very wedded to the 14-day quarantine as the only truly safe and effective method of making sure that we don't inadvertently bring the virus back into Australia. And I think with good cause, because we are now in a position where we're one of the very few countries in the world with extremely low infection rates, and therefore it's going to be of high risk for us to re-import the virus and see outbreaks like we saw from the Ruby Princess. So I think the caution is well and truly understood. Having said that, Greg Hunt and the team at Health are working on new tests to try and find testing regimes which have got a much higher level of integrity, that they can then feel comfortable that we can start to reduce the quarantine. At the moment, we have quarantine even between the states. So specialist workers moving from the East Coast into Northern Territory or Western Australia also need to quarantine for 14 days prior to going on to oil rigs and specialised jobs in ports and so on. So it is a blanket rule. We are looking at whether there is potential to open international travel to countries that have very similar control mechanisms and similar infection rates to us. And I guess New Zealand has been highly publicised. So it may be that we see trials done with those countries that have got similar similar rates of the virus to us, that we feel that we can control better. But other than that, I do think it is going to be quite some time before we see international travel open up to an extent that we can see conferences and events of that nature.
Thanks very much, Nev. I think we're just about out of time in terms of your very tight constraints, which we fully understand. I'm therefore going to ask Peter Dakin to resume the virtual podium, if he wouldn't mind, to say a few words of thanks on everyone's behalf.
Thanks, Reg. And Nev, fantastic to see you again after so long. I've always regarded you as a quiet achiever, but when we look what you've done across your business success, and also what you've done socially, particularly with Aboriginal communities, you've been an extraordinary contributor to this country. The Prime Minister has certainly picked the right man to take us forward. You've got a huge challenge, I think, to be able to be addressing those areas where we can value add as a country, and hopefully have a little bit of a longer term strategy rather than just sort of 3-year government cycles, perhaps a 10-year strategy for this country to value add, and get our Australians back to work, you're certainly the man for the job. So thank you for presenting to us today when you're such a busy person. You might recall that we used to provide a lovely bottle of wine courtesy of one of our members, but Joe in the office will make sure that you are given a gift from the club, which will be a pair of our R100 centenary socks provided by our own member Phil Endersby, and I'm sure you can wear with pride. We always look for a photo of an unusual spot where somebody's been wearing these socks. I can just envisage you with your feet hanging out of the helicopter showing your R100 socks. You can send it back to the club. So all the best to yourself and the family, and we wish you well for what will be a very challenging time, trying to reboot our economy and get as many back to work as possible in the shortest period of time. Would everyone show their appreciation to Nev, please?
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Nev. Back to you, President Kevin.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Nev, and well orchestrated there, Reg Smith. Timing worked perfectly. It's now my pleasure to confer Paul Harris Fellow on Bernie McIntosh. And the recognition as a Paul Harris Fellow was established in 1957 in honour of Paul Harris, who founded Rotary in 1905. It is the tradition of this club and many others in this part of the world to honour, by naming a Paul Harris Fellow, members and non-members who have helped build a better world by their outstanding contributions to the club and or the community. People who practice the Rotary model, service above self. Bernie McIntosh was inducted into our club on the 14th of September 2005. His sponsor was David Whitner, classification mortgage finance. He became a member of the Hawthorn Crew group and as a Paul Harris Fellow, 6 Sapphire, for his very generous support of the Rotary Foundation. It is now time to recognise this meritorious service that Bernie has rendered to Rotary Melbourne and our humanitarian work over the last 15 years that he's been part of. And what an extensive club involvement that's been. Not only the Rotary Foundation contributions, but the 0808 committee, the President's nominating committee. He's been meeting MC and Sergeant. He's been the relationship manager with our project with the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence and supported the youth who have spent many hours in his office with work familiarisation experiences. He's been chair of the Welfare of the Young Committee and a director of membership 2010-2012, and currently the director for youth and vocational services 2018-20. He has been a strong financial supporter of all club fundraising efforts. In 2017, Bernie received the Axel Award for giving that little bit extra in service above self. And Lisa and I have very pleasant memories of a sunny Sunday in 2016 when Bernie and Virginia opened their Romswood farm for a peony picnic and donated all of the proceeds. This was the second biggest club fundraiser for that year, and the proceeds supported our End to Chroma project. Members have spoken to me about Bernie having a positive disposition, being a clear communicator and a good listener. I acknowledge that Bernie is a delightful person and a dependable person to work with, and so much has been achieved because of his loyal endeavours. Bernie, for sustained commitment to service above self, it gives me pleasure to name you on behalf of the board and members of the Rotary Club of Melbourne, a Paul Harris Fellow. Your Paul Harris pin and citation will be delivered to you in due course. But would members and guests please join me in congratulating Bernie. And now, Bernie, I'd be delighted if you'd say a few words.
Thanks, Kevin, from actually up here at Romswood Farm today, where it's a sunny 8 degrees. Hello to everyone. Thank you, Kevin. I'm quite humbled by the Paul Harris Fellowship Award, as it's an individual award, and one of the aspects I enjoy with Rotary is working as part of a team. It's what really motivates me, and to be a member of many committees over the time, to have come across many different Rotarians, they continue to inspire me at every one of our meetings and being involved in every one of our projects. Particular thanks to the late David Whitner, who encouraged me to join. As many of you would remember, David was very difficult to deny, and yes, I certainly enjoyed his early friendship in becoming a Rotarian. So, to each of you, thank you. You continue to inspire me, along with each of you in many of our committees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernie, and I know your day is not done, because we'll enjoy you coming online for our board meeting tonight, and look forward to your participation in those deliberations. Congratulations, Bernie. You can share the day when you do get a chance to raise a glass with Virginia and the family. Congratulations.
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you.
And if I could just move on to a few little items here. Today is the 22nd anniversary of Sue McCarthy's membership, and also the 28th anniversary of our good mate Kevin O'Flaherty. So congratulations to Sue and to Kevin. The Coffee Club I've already mentioned earlier, 10:30 this Friday, details in the bulletin. Look forward to you jumping on board. In relation to the budget, a notice from the incoming executive team that the committee chairs and directors will be receiving by email this week, a request, of course, for their budget submissions. This is a key activity where the Treasurer works closely with the committees and directors to determine the funding for our club's projects and activities in the upcoming year. So please make sure you give attention to that request immediately upon receipt of that paperwork. In addition, the International Student Volunteering opportunity is available to us. We're developing a partnership with the City of Melbourne on a number of fronts. And we've been keen to uphold the reputation as a world-leading destination for international students, and to encourage and assist those students in a program, volunteering program, to help them with their resume review work. So volunteers are required. We'll have further notice in the bulletin, and anyone who is an employer and feels they can assist in this way, please contact Robert Fisher, who is working with Shane McElroy, Senior Business Development Coordinator for the City of Melbourne. The additional item today, which I'm very proud to introduce, is our new concept of environment and sustainability. And Gary Fowler has been front and centre on this initiative, along with others, and I'll now call on Gary to update us as to what the steps are. Gary, over to you.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks for the opportunity of talking about this exciting new area, which we call environmental sustainability. As people may know, this has been a major new initiative of Rotary International and it's likely to be introduced as a major area of service in its own right, although it's already obviously involved in a lot of activities in which we are currently involved. A lot is happening around the world. there's an organisation called ESRAG, which is the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group. And that's been operating for a couple of years and working on a number of initiatives, as well as at district and club levels. The board's identified that now is the time for our club to get involved. And Peter Berg and I have actually been involved in identifying everything that's happening at district and international levels. And it'll enable us to really hit the ground running. The committee has the enthusiastic support of all members of the P-Train. Thank you, Kevin, and all our future presidents. And it's really going to focus on building and enhancing existing projects, as well as identifying new ones. The projects will include initiatives such as reducing waste and recycling, regeneration and cleanup of the environment, reducing emissions, and the whole area of water and sanitation. I'm delighted to advise that Mina Gooley, Jeremy Oates, and Ari Talantis have already offered to join Peter Berg and myself as at least as foundation members of the committee. And we're just inviting all other members of the committee, of our members that are interested in this area, to put their names forward to join us on the committee. It'll be of particular interest to younger members and corporates, and will create a lot of volunteer activities for the club. So if any of our members are interested, we would be delighted for them to, if they'd contact me or Peter Berg or through Joe in the office, that would be much appreciated. Thanks, Kevin, and thanks for your support on this.
You're most welcome, Gary, and thank you for your energy that you're putting into it. And I know President-elect Marion has this as part of the Horizons planning and the operational plan for next year. As a special acknowledgement, I'd like to let everyone know and pass on our congratulations on the 99th anniversary of the Rotary Club of Sydney. We were very pleased to have President Barbara Ward online for the R100 meeting that Hugh Bucknell chaired on Monday night. So I'll be pleased to pass on to President Barbara and President-elect Fatina Ali congratulations of Rotary Club of Melbourne. Whilst we were both having our inaugural meetings a few weeks apart, it's very interesting to note that both Sydney and Melbourne clubs were chartered on the 1st of May when the official charter came from Evanston. So congratulations to Rotary Sydney. And they are certainly on board, front and centre with the forthcoming centenary celebrations and all the effort that's going into the national project, the Australasian project, and promotion with every district governor to have projects in every district throughout every club in Australia. So thank you to everyone for joining our meeting today. A reminder that next week's meeting is a very special meeting, the Young Achievers Award, and that's being scripted online. So the new challenge of being able to deliver that online will be a feature of next week, where 3 young achievers will be recognised for their volunteering excellence in our community. So please join us next week, same time, same address. And in the meantime, stay safe, spread kindness. And now I close the meeting with the National Anthem.
Bye, everyone.